Hi, I'm Kaja.
And I'm Joanna.
And this is Starlit Citadel Reviews.
Star Wars Armada is a fleet-scale miniatures game set in the Star Wars universe by James Niffen, Christian T. Peterson, and Fantasy Flight Games.
In Star Wars Armada, players control Imperial and Rebel fleets in an epic space battle. It's a two-player game that lasts up to 2 hours. Expansions are being released in waves of individual ships and squadrons that can be used for fleet building.
Players begin Star Wars Armada by building 2 fleets and collecting their ships, cards, and tokens. They clear a 3-foot by 6-foot play area, place all additional tokens and cards outside of it, and set their ship and squadron dials to the maximum values shown on their cards. The player whose fleet has the lowest cost chooses the first player, and they collect the initiative token.
Players set the sliders on their squadrons to match the initiative token. Next, they choose an objective, follow any special setup rules it lists, and place the obstacles. Beginning with the first player, they take turns deploying 1 ship and 2 squadrons at a time into a 3 by 4 foot setup area. Then the game begins.
Star Wars Armada is played in 6 rounds, and each round has 4 phases. In the command phase, players secretly choose and assigned command dials to each of their ships. Each ship gets a number of dials equal to their command value, and the new command goes at the bottom of the dial stack.
In the ship phase, players take turns activating their ships. First, they reveal the ship's top command dial and spend it to either get its effect or collect its corresponding command token. Tokens can be spent in later ship phases, but they're less powerful than dials.
The Navigate command lets you alter your ship's speed by 1 and alter one of its yaw values by 1 during movement. The Navigate token just lets you modify speed.
The Repair command gives you engineering points equal to your ship's engineering value, and these points can be spent to move shield power between hull zones, repair shields, or repair hull damage. The token gives you half the engineering points.
The Concentrate Fire command lets you add 1 extra die to your dice pool when you're rolling to attack. The Concentrate Fire token lets you re-roll 1 die. The Squadron command lets you immediately activate a number of squadrons equal to the ship's squadron value, which are within close or medium range of the ship. Those squadrons can immediately move and attack. The Squadron token just lets you activate 1.
Next, your ship can make up to 2 attacks, as long as they originate from different hull zones, and these are marked on the ship's base. When attacking a ship, you target 1 hull zone within your line of sight. When attacking squadrons, you target each squadron within your attacking hull zone's firing arc, 1 at a time.
The attacking player rolls the color and number of dice assigned to the attacking hull zone on the ship, modified by the range as given on the range ruler. The further away your target is, the less colors of dice you'll get to roll.
Now, any accuracy icon you roll can be used to cancel one of the defender's defense tokens. Defense tokens can be exhausted to cancel hits, reduce damage, or move damage to a different hull zone. The defender may only exhaust 1 token of each type per attack. And if you spend an exhausted token, it's removed from the game.
After defense tokens have been spent, the target takes damage equal to the number of hits rolled. The target hull zone's shield value is reduced by 1 point per hit, and further hits are counted with face-down damage cards. A ship also takes damage for every critical.
If at least 1 critical has been rolled, and the target is dealt at least 1 damage card, the first card is dealt face up and its effect is resolved. Squadrons are unshielded and have the hull value on their dial reduced by 1 per hit, and they're not affected by criticals. If a ship or a squadron takes hull damage equal to its hull value, then it's destroyed.
After attacking, a ship must move its current speed. The distance it covers is determined by the maneuver tool, which can be bent at each joint by a number of clicks equal to its yaw value. Ships can move through any obstacle, but cannot end up overlapping another ship, squadron, obstacle, or the maneuver tool.
If a ship ends up overlapping any squadrons, then they're picked up and put back in any position touching that ship's base, and this is done by the opposing player. If a ship would have overlapped another ship, then its speed is reduced by enough to avoid the collision, and both ships take 1 card of damage. Obstacles may also damage ships that land on them, depending on their type.
In the squadron phase, players take turns activating 2 squadrons, one at a time. Each squadron may either move the distance indicated on its card or attack. Squadrons can attack targets within range 1 with a 360-degree firing arc and roll different dice depending on whether their target is a squadron or a ship.
In the status phase, players refresh any exhausted defense tokens or upgrade cards, and then flip the initiative token. Then the next round begins.
The game ends immediately if all of one player's ships are destroyed, and that player loses. If that doesn't happen, then the game ends after 6 rounds. Players add up the cost of all of the ships and squadrons that they have destroyed, plus they add any points that they got from the objective. The player with the highest score is the winner.
So I've gone on record here before as being a pretty big Star Wars fan, and I've got to say that Armada is the game that I have always wanted for Star Wars. I really liked the X-Wing miniatures game when it came out. I still think it's a very strong game, but I almost can't imagine playing it again after having picked up Armada. It's just that great. The biggest thing that Armada really adds is this phenomenal sense of scale. You understand that you're dealing with really, really large scale battles, that they're taking place over huge distances, that the ships that are involved are almost unimaginably huge, and their destructive power, as well as just the power that it takes to make them do anything, is enormous. I really love the differences that come between the ships and the squadrons in this game. You've got combat that's happening on 2 very different levels, on 2 very different scales. The ships are able to deal enormous amounts of damage, but they're really slow and it takes a long time for commands to actually get executed. And the squadrons are incredibly limited in terms of the distances that they can deal with, but they move so much faster and they're so much more responsive and they're so much better at dealing with other fighters. There's this real sense that you're marshaling a range of very, very different and equally capable units to deal with a battle that happens on a whole bunch of different fronts. It makes it feel exciting, it makes it incredibly engaging, and it adds a ton of strategic depth. Probably my favorite little rule or mechanic that really brings this out is the maneuver tool. It looks kind of dorky, and when I first picked it up and saw that it had all of these articulated hinges and weird protrusions, it seemed like a silly gimmick. But it's actually really integral to how the ships work and making them feel big and heavy and like they've got a ton of inertia. I love the fact that you always have to move your speed. You often end up running into problems because your ship is actually traveling farther than you want it to. And the way that yaw can be really fine-tuned for each speed and for each ship type means that they move differently. Your Star Destroyer is big and lumbering and it deals a bunch of damage, but oh my god, is it slow, and once you get it going in one direction, it's next to impossible to actually turn it. Whereas the other ships are much more maneuverable, much faster, and they interact very differently with the battlefield. It's a wonderful way of bringing the fight to life, and I'm really impressed with how it's executed. I do have a complaint about this game, and it might be a big one depending on who you are, and that is that it is expensive. One starter box for Star Wars Armada is going to cost you pretty close to $100, and the game really wants you to have 2 in order to play. To the point that the cover art on the box actually shows the number of ships that would come in 2 starter sets rather than just 1. As well, like, you have to play with a slightly modified rule set if you've only got the components in the box. The game is really, really designed for a larger scale. Now, it rewards that fantastically. It feels so good to have all of those ships out on the table and to really have these enormous forces at your command. But that is a very steep cost of entry, and I feel like for a lot of people, the game is going to live or die based on whether they've got anybody who's willing to collect it with them. If you're paying the cost of all of this yourself, it's probably going to be prohibitive. So you need to find a friend who's willing to jump into this with you. And I promise it is rewarding.
So I'm not necessarily the kind of person who would pick up a miniatures game. It's really not my type of game. I have enjoyed playing them, but it isn't necessarily the game I'd go out and buy and bring out every gaming night. Usually that's because I find that minis games are quite fiddly in terms of their components. Now that isn't really the case here, I gotta say, and I'll get back to the components later. But I do find a little bit of fiddliness in the rule set. The base rules actually are fantastic. They're really nice and there's a lot I like about them, but there are a lot of exceptions within the rules you're gonna have to keep track of while you're playing. And now that really beautiful epic fleet battle might get a bit interrupted by the fact that you're constantly sort of trying to track a bunch of stuff. And if you're not entirely familiar with the rules, that could slow you down, bog things down a bit, and really interrupt the flow. Now that will get better the more you play, but that's something to keep in mind going into it. There are some things I really like about the rules in this game, and one of those things are the command tokens, or the command dials. Now, the command dials make you think long term. And that's wonderful. So this isn't just a dogfight. This isn't just a skirmish. This is the kind of thing where you've actually got to think several turns in advance. You've got to come up with a long-term strategy and figure out what you're going to do. And that not only bolsters the strategy element of this game, but I also find that it really contributes to the theme. The theme in this game is amazing. I also am a huge fan of Star Wars. And this game translates the Star Wars world and those epic battles you see on the big screen really nicely, really well. And I think actually that long-term planning element adds a lot because you're not just reacting to what the other player is doing right now. You're also thinking bigger. You're thinking long-term. You're thinking strategy. And that contributes that sense of epicness and high stakes that is present in the movies and all those battles that you see. Now, I can't possibly talk about a Fantasy Flight game without talking about components. Component quality is brilliant. It's wonderful in this game. You're going to pull these ships out of the box and they look just like what you saw in the movies. You don't have to paint them. They snap together really nicely and everything is clean and good quality and really fun to play with. And not fiddly at all, actually. You're not trailing a bunch of tokens behind your ships as you maneuver around the play area. Everything's really nicely put together. And I would expect that from Fantasy Flight for sure. So I think that anybody who loves Star Wars should try this game, for sure. Anybody who loves tabletop miniatures games would probably really enjoy this game. But if you're interested in science fiction or you just like really interesting tactical challenges, I would say you should probably give this game a shot because I think that it's actually more accessible than a lot of people are going to give it credit for.
Enjoy it, you will.